The wilderness and the solitary place shall be glad for them, and the desert shall rejoice and blossom as the rose. Isaiah chapter 35, verse 1.
The American West, a vast untamed wilderness, uninviting to most, but one man saw this barren land as an enormous opportunity to cultivate his ideas, quench his botanical appetite, and sow the seeds of his migration.
This man was Joseph Ellis Johnson, born in Pomfret, New York on April 28, 1817, to Ezekiel and Julie Hills Johnson.
Young Joseph Ellis lived with his family in an old brown cottage surrounded by the rolling hills of Chautauqua County, New York.
One day, in the late 1820s, Joseph overheard his mother tell his brothers of his frailty due to long-term sickness. She told them that he would not live long, and that they were to relieve him of the difficult tasks around the farm and shield him from any strains.
The startled young boy decided that he would not give in to his illnesses. He would learn all he could about herbs and plants and heal himself. His boyhood curiosity laid the foundation for his tremendous work in botany and horticulture, and prepared him for his great role in the fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy.
Around 1830, the Johnson family learned of Joseph Smith, leader of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and were among the early converts to this religion.
Non-believers ridiculed the members of this young church, and shortly after joining, the family and other members were driven from their homes. They looked westward for a place where they could freely practice their religion.
And so the migration began. In the spring of 1833, Julia brought her children to Kirtland, Ohio, with the other members of the church.
In Kirtland, the family helped build a temple. Joseph Johnson, now a young man, took part by working in the brickyard.
But the saints were not to stay in Kirtland long. Persecution by mobs forced them to continue their great exodus westward.
The Johnson family went 20 miles north of Nauvoo and settled their own town, Ramus, which Joseph later changed to Macedonia. While here, Joseph fell in love with and married Miss Harriet Snyder.
Johnson put many of his ideas and talents to work. He was the first postmaster, school trustee, town clerk, and church recorder. He rented a large shop where he did odd jobs and provided a meeting place for the saints. With all this, he also found time to take care of his farm.
On June 27, 1844, mobs jailed and brutally killed Joseph Smith, the prophet of the LDS Church and friend of the Johnson family. In the spring of the next year, Joseph E. Johnson and his family were driven from their home in Macedonia. Most of his material objects were lost, but they didn't take the things which were most precious to him, his family, his religion, and his knowledge.
They went on to Nauvoo, where he put that knowledge to work. He made medicines, confectionaries, and sold cooling beverages in a 4-penny drugstore. He also attended to duties at the post office. He wasn't in Nauvoo very long.
The mobs were getting worse, forcing all of the remaining saints to leave. Joseph was taken prisoner and released, then ordered to leave town now. That very day, with his wife and 2 babies, they left everything they had again and crossed to the Iowa side of the Mississippi River to Bonaparte.
Now living in a tent, he again used his talents to help others. He opened a department store, which included medical needs. However, they continued their trek westward by the summer of 1848.
They settled in Canesville, Iowa in 1849, which Joseph renamed Council Bluffs. Here he built the first frame building in Pottawatomie County.
In early 1850, he continued his westward migration to go toward the Salt Lake Valley for a short stay to see if it was a good place to bring his family. He crossed the plains to Utah with 3 of his friends, one of which was Orson Hyde, an apostle of the church.
On the trip, he rediscovered his childhood love of nature, botanical life, and scenic marvels. While in Salt Lake City, he purchased land and wrote some verses for the Deseret News.
They returned November 18, 1850 to Council Bluffs.
In 1851, Johnson spent much of his time as leader of one of the first Wild West Indian shows, and even showed it to the United States President, 30 years before Buffalo Bill Cody.
In that same year, he wrote articles for the Frontier Guardian and helped start the weekly Western Bugle, where he shared many of his ideas with others.
While still living in Council Bluffs, Joseph manifested a most passionate belief in the great future of Omaha. He helped choose its location and name. Joseph opened the first store in this city, which then consisted of only 6 houses, and launched the first newspaper ever published on Nebraska soil, the Omaha Arrow. In 1854, Joseph accompanied the first party of explorers for a railroad crossing on the Missouri River. In 1856, He founded the city Crescent, Iowa, and started the Crescent City Oracle. Wherever he went, he took his ideas and thirst for knowledge with him.
In 1859, he moved to Wood River, where he started the earliest paper in central Nebraska, the Huntsman Echo. Johnson went on to Denver, where 100 years later, in 1959, he was recognized in the centennial edition of a Denver paper as being one of the pioneer merchants of Denver when gold was discovered there.
In 1861, Joseph moved his family to Utah. They purchased, named, and settled Spring Lake Villa in Utah County.
Here, he sold plants suitable to the region and edited the Farmer's Oracle, which was the first publication in Utah after the Deseret News.
His accomplishments were recognized in 1974 on a monument erected by the Daughters of Utah Pioneers.
In 1865, Brigham Young called Johnson to go to the St. George area to study soil, weather conditions, and help supply the people with many trees and vines to give them more food.
Joseph gladly accepted the call. He then started the first pioneer newspaper of southern Utah called Our Dixie Times. As an expert nurseryman, he shared his extensive knowledge and used his newspaper to encourage everyone to grow fruit. He was county school superintendent and a notary. He opened the first public library south of Salt Lake with his own collection of books. There was a room where everyone could read, if they brought their own candle.
He produced medicines and opened the first drugstore in St. George. It was called Valley Town Remedies, where he sold many of his own potions and herbal remedies.
Joseph cultivated many of the trees, vines, and flowers which are still in that area today, and contributed more to the early fruit industry in the Dixie region than any other person. The many crinkle-leaf mulberries, or Johnson mulberry, growing in southern Utah and Nevada today, originated from a grafted tree in Joseph Johnson's yard.
Several of the plants cultivated in the St. George area were brought across the plains by wagon, as Joseph's wife walked along the side, holding her small son's hand by day, and watered the plants at each nightly stop. Joseph had gathered the pits of the sand cherry while crossing the plains. He used them to produce a superior hybrid called the Johnson cherry, with improved size and flavor.
He started the Gardeners Club in 1865 and the Pomological Society in 1868. The Gardeners Club still stands and bears a plaque honoring Joseph Ellis Johnson.
He hoped to promote the highest point of excellence and value in growing fruits and crops that would adapt to the warm Dixie weather.
Joseph started the first fair, where people displayed the fruits, grains, vegetables, wines, flowers, and other items they grew. Joseph got creative and exhibited the best assortment of family medicines, which he made himself.
Joseph discovered many new plant species in St. George. The governor and many horticulturists from eastern universities came to see these discoveries and boarded with them during their stay.
Brigham Young's home adjoined Joseph's garden, and Brigham had a gate made through the fence so he could walk in the garden for pastime or go through it on his way downtown. His garden was known statewide. Joseph has won widespread fame as one of the leading horticulturists in the entire West. He won medals in 1872 and 1879 for the best fenced garden in Utah and the best collection of medical herbs.
I have a garden and grounds which I have much reason to be proud of, and yet how many days and nights of labor, how many aches and pains no one can surmise or appreciate. People seem to think that I have the power of magic and succeed with so much ease, the ease I cannot see, but hope of a brighter day lures me on to toil.
In 1882, he left St. George with several members of his family to go to Arizona because of his health. A large farewell party was held in his honor in the largest hall in town, where citizens of St. George, whose respect he had earned, said farewell.
Joseph Ellis Johnson lived in Arizona until his death on December 17, 1882. Joseph had 3 wives and 29 children, and left a great heritage to his large posterity and to the people of the western United States. He is remembered and admired by many to this day for his accomplishments.
He began as a weak but curious child, yet he became a powerful part of the great exodus west.
While others brought supplies and belongings, Joseph brought ideas that dramatically changed the communities he lived in.
He made notable contributions in every stop along the way, as he migrated from New York to Utah and beyond.
To him we say thank you for the legacy and the heritage you have etched across the continent and in our hearts. Just as the wheels of a wagon impress their path along rough trails,
So was done by the remarkable life and migration of Joseph Ellis Johnson.
He truly fulfilled Isaiah's prophecy and caused the desert to blossom as the rose.